Alright, today we're going to look at some key vocabulary words so you can understand some different angle relationships. So the first thing I want to look at is the two keywords that we see right here. So we're going to look at what is called properties, and in math, properties are like true statements that are proven, just some rules for you. Cut by a transversal. So properties of parallel lines cut by a transversal. So a line that intersects two or more lines is called a transversal. And the lines that are never intersecting are called parallel lines. So in this example right here, the parallel lines never intersect, okay? And the transversal is this line right here that is intersecting or crossing at those two lines. Now we could have more than two lines, but it has to be at least two lines. So after that's done, what happens is we have some angle relationships that form. So let me show you what we're going to create on here. So inside this, we're going to look at some different angle relationships. Okay? So the first one are called vertical angles. So vertical angles, I'm going to capitalize that V in purple. These are going to be angles that are across each other, and they only touch at the vertex. That's why I did that V in purple. So for example, here's our vertex right here, made by that transversal. And if I were to label these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I were to name those angles right there. So if this right here is the vertex, and this right here is another vertex, we're going to label the angles that are vertical with one another. So angle 1 and angle 4 are across from each other from that vertex. Okay? If we keep looking, we can see angle 2 and angle 3 are also vertical angles. So they're vertical from one another because they are across from each other, only touching at the vertex. Okay? So let's look at some more, make sure we're understanding it. Angle 2 and 3, so then we can see 5 and 8. 5 and 8 are vertical. They're sharing the vertex, but they're diagonally across from each other. That helps you to think of it too. And then last but not least, we have angle 6 and angle 7. Okay? So those are what the vertical angles are. But here's the good thing. With vertical angles, they are actually congruent. So I'm going to make that note. Congruent means equal to. Vertical angles are congruent, equal to one another. So let's just say on this picture, if you knew what angle 2 was, you're actually going to know what angle 3 is. If you know the measurement of angle 7, you're going to know the measurement of angle 6. So I'm going to show you with all these vocabulary terms today, so if they actually only give you one angle measurement on here, based on these other angle relationships we're going to see, you can actually figure out all the other angle relationships. So let me show you a little bit more. So corresponding angles are those angles that are in the same position. So they are in the same position of the two lines in relation to the transversal. When the lines are parallel, their measure are equal or congruent. So let's do some examples of that. So if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 again, in the same position, so for example, if we had our parallel lines right here, and my transversal that's intersecting those two parallel lines, what you want to think about, okay, in the upper left-hand corner of this parallel line and the transversal, well down here, if it helps you to see it that way, this is the upper left-hand corner of the parallel line and transversal. So that means that the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 5 because those two are corresponding angles. Okay? So let's see. That means 2, well that's the upper right-hand corner from that parallel line and transversal, if that helps you to see it, is equal to the measure of angle 6. Okay, so just kind of something to think about to see how you can see these patterns. And then if we look at 3, well, that's the lower left. So the lower left down here is 7. Just something to think about. Measure of angle 3 is corresponding to the measure of angle 7. Therefore, they are congruent. They are equal. And last but not least, angle 4 is corresponding with the measure of angle 8. And because corresponding angles are equal, that's how we can set them up. Those are corresponding angles. All right, so we've already learned 2 key terms, vertical angles and corresponding angles. We have 3 more. So alternate exterior. Alternate, if you think about it, means the opposite. Exterior means outside. Okay? So if you have alternate exterior angles, they're the 2 outside angles that lie on the opposite sides of the transversal. When these lines are parallel, their measures are equal or congruent. So here again, if I just keep my angles the same, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, these are just examples. So like if they tell you that this angle was 110 degrees, then that angle would also be 110 degrees because they're vertical. So I'm just putting in numbers to name the angle measurements. So that way you can use them on the examples when given. So we want just the outside angle. So here's the easiest way to see it. We want the 2 outside angles that lie on the opposite sides of the transversal. Well, here's the transversal itself. And if you think about it, if you cover these up, because those are all the inside angles, 1, 2, 7, and 8 are your outside angles of those parallel lines. Okay? So the measure of angle 1 is outside the transversal, but it's opposite from transversal. This is upper left, this is lower right. So measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 8 because those are my opposite alternate angles. Alternate means opposite, exterior, outside. So using that vocabulary to help us out. And then my other 2, angle 2 and angle 7, well, those are outside those parallel lines, and they're opposite of one another. This is the upper right, this is the lower left. So those 2 are congruent. Okay? These in the middle are not exterior. They're not outside those parallel lines. Those are interior. They're inside. So alternate interior, well again, alternate means inside. Alternate means opposite. Interior means inside. I got ahead of myself. So we want the opposite inside angles. I meant to write opposite and I wrote outside. Good thing I double checked. So these are the 2 angles that lie opposite sides of the transversal. When the lines are parallel, their measures are equal. Okay, so if these lines are parallel, and that's my vocabulary for transversal, is going through at least 2 parallel lines that never intersect, could go through more, but we know these relationships. Okay, so if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, now I want only the interior angles, so that's inside those parallel lines. So we want the opposite angles from the transversal. Okay? So if you see, 3 and 5 are on the same side, they're on the left. 4 and 6 are on the same side, they're on the right. Okay? So if we look at it, if we want 3, well, it's the upper left-hand corner if you kind of cross out these exterior. So that's that. So 3 and 6 go together. And 5 and 4. So if it helps you to kind of cross those out to see it that way, that helps you out. So measure of angle 4, its alternate interior angle is the measure of angle 5, and therefore they are congruent according to my definition. And angle 3 is inside those parallel lines on the opposite side is angle 6, and they are congruent. So this looks like a less than sign, but it's actually the sign for angle. So a less than sign you would draw kind of like that. This one you kind of more flat on the bottom. Okay, forgot to say that a little bit ago. That's what those mean. All right, we have one more property, and those are called supplementary angles. And that's a vocabulary word that we actually know from 6th grade. So a supplementary angle are two and only two angles whose degrees or measures add up to be 180 degrees. So they're adding up to be 180 degrees. So they make what we call a straight line. Okay? So what a lot of students don't realize is supplementary angles don't necessarily have to be right next to each other, but that's the easiest way to see them. So that's something to think about if you need some help with it. But depending on what the measures are, they could actually be right not next to each other, but still be supplementary angles. The way that I remember supplementary for that vocabulary word is I write the letter S for supplementary, and then I go whoosh, and draw a line through it and make 180 degrees. That's just a silly way I remember it. Because when we talked about complementary, that's 90 degrees. So I had a different strategy for that. So again, if we were to label this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, we could see that these are their parallel lines and this is the transversal. There are many supplementary angles in this picture. But the easiest way to see it is look on the straight line. Look at the parallel lines. So do a little color for you. So we can see, let's look with measure of angle 1 plus, well, what's on that straight line? Is a 2. Equals 180 degrees. But that's not the only one. The measure of angle 1 plus, well, we have that transversal is also a straight line. So the measure of angle 3 is 180 degrees. Okay? We have many examples on this one. Let's go down to the 6. The measure of angle 6, well, that one's right next to the 5 on this orange parallel line. But the measure of angle 6 can also be added to the measure of angle 8 and be 180 degrees. So there's many ways that we could see this. Okay? Here's something else to think about. So we're going to kind of use our corresponding angles, our alternate exterior. Think about that. So if we know that the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 8, because those are alternate exterior and therefore congruent. So think about that. Measure of angle 1 is, let me rewrite that. The measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 8. What that means is that actually the measure of angle 8 plus the measure of angle 2 is also 180 degrees. So that's kind of thinking in advance about those supplementary angles. Again, because we knew that other vocabulary. So go ahead and see if you can make a list of all the different supplementary angles there are.